warm welcome again to the program. We begin with developments from the Israel-Hamas war, and Palestinians in Rafah are still trying to make sense of yesterday's Israeli aerial bombardment on the southern Gaza city. The Israeli military had said it conducted a series of strikes on the city and extracted 2 Israeli Argentine hostages held by Hamas. That extremely intense airstrikes left about 100 people, including children, dead. Hundreds of Palestinians have now started to flee Rafah city for the central area. According to officials, dozens of Palestinian fighters have been killed in clashes by Israeli forces in southern and central Gaza over the last 24 hours. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced he had ordered troops to prepare to expand its ground operation to Rafah. He vowed to defeat Hamas gunmen hiding in the city. As it stands, the death toll of Palestinians killed since the October 7 attack has risen to 28,473 and more than 68,000 injured. That's according to the health ministry in Gaza. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden is sounding a warning to Israel, saying vulnerable civilians in Rafah must be protected at all costs, speaking at a White House meeting with King Abdullah II of Jordan. President Biden noted that any major military operation in the city should not proceed without credible plan for ensuring the safety of those living there. There's been a chorus of condemnation and growing concern over Israel's ground operations in Rafah, an area once declared as a safe zone. China urges Israel to stop its military operations in Rafah as soon as possible, warning of a serious humanitarian disaster. European Union Policy Chief Joseph Borrell urged allies to send weapons to Israel. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Cameron says Israel needs to stop and think seriously before taking further action in Rafah. In the meantime, as hostilities intensify in Rafah, hospital in Khan Yunis has been buckling under pressure, taking care of the sick and wounded. According to the World Health Organization, the hospital is overwhelmed, overcrowded, and undersupplied. Officials are calling for assistance to keep the hospital running.
You can see the conditions that some places there are no mattresses for children. You see people sleeping in the corridors. You go to the emergency room and you see they're overcrowded. You see there's not enough material. We even went to the burns unit and we spoke to the doctor there, and she said she doesn't even have enough painkillers to treat. We saw a young child who's 7 years of age who 75% burned, and she didn't have the actual morphine to relieve the pain. The 7-year-old girl was screaming in pain. So that kind of thing tells you that the systems here are breaking down. We're not getting enough supply in here. We're not getting enough material in here to support the doctors, even cleaning the beds, cleaning the floors, that type of material. The basic stuff is not there. This hospital is under real pressure, and we have to do something to ease that pressure by bringing more material in, more drugs, more support. The staff are working 24/7. They've got so many volunteers coming in here, and they come to work every single day, despite the fact it's a very dangerous environment, and then they're working so hard.
The whole facility is really almost a town with a hospital inside it. There's more than 20,000 displaced people living in the health facility. There's more than 700 patients there, 20 are in intensive care. But importantly, there's more than 200 that are ready to be discharged but just can't because they have no safe place to go, they have no homes to go to, no shelters to go to.
Staying with conditions in Gaza, the United Nations has raised concerns over the situation in Rafah. The president of the UN General Assembly, Dennis Francis, says he is deeply distressed by Israel's escalated military operation in the southern city of the Gaza Strip. A spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, says no place is safe in Gaza. He's also noted that the insecurity in Rafah has hindered the ability to cater to the humanitarian needs of civilians in need.
All respect of strikes in Rafah have heightened the concerns of an escalation in Gaza's southernmost city, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have sought refuge. Of the 1.7 million people displaced in Gaza, the majority are situated in Rafah Governorate, where humanitarian operations are now based. The growing insecurity in Rafah has greatly impacted our ability to respond to the humanitarian needs of the population there. Ground operations, ground military operations, and heavy fighting between Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups continue to be reported, obviously in Rafah, but also in Khan Yunis. In Khan Yunis itself, intense fighting, especially near the Nasser and Al-Amal hospitals, continues to jeopardize the safety not only of medical staff, but also, of course, of the patients, the wounded and the sick, those doctors and nurses are trying to take care of. What we want is to ensure that anything that happens is done in full respect of international law, in the full respect of the protection of civilians. We will not be party to forced displacement of people. As it is, there is no place that it's safe, currently safe in Gaza. There's a great challenge. Vast majority of people are in the south. In the north and in central Gaza, where there may be less, let's say, kinetic activity, to put it diplomatically, there still remains a huge challenge of unexploded ordnance. You can't send people back to areas that is littered with unexploded ordnance, not to mention a lack of shelter. The humanitarian supplies may last us just days. We're not getting enough. We're not getting enough goods in. I mean, we've seen there were demonstrations at the Kerem Shalom crossing. There were demonstrations in Nitzana, which has hampered our ability to get all the humanitarian aid we want to see in. And frankly, the deconfliction process that we have in place with the Israeli authorities is also not working, which means that we're not able to go north of Rafah in a way that we want to go in.
More reactions now, this time from the spokesperson of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ravina Shamdasani, who described the situation in Rafah as terrifying. She emphasized the need for an immediate ceasefire and called on the world leaders to ensure further crimes in Gaza are stopped.
Potential full-fledged military incursion into Rafah, where some 1.5 million Palestinians are packed against the Egyptian border with nowhere further to flee, is terrifying. An extremely high number of civilians, mostly women and children, will likely be killed or injured. We have warned against actions violating the laws of war. The prospect of such an operation into Rafah risks further atrocity crimes. The world must not allow this to happen. Those with influence must restrain rather than enable. There must be an immediate ceasefire. All remaining hostages must be released, and there must be renewed collective resolve to reach a political solution.
Well, the United States Senate has approved a $95 billion foreign aid package for not just Israel, but for Ukraine. The bill includes $60 billion to support Ukraine in its fight against Russia, $14.1 billion in security assistance for Israel, $9.2 billion in humanitarian assistance, and $4.8 billion to support regional partners in the Indo-Pacific region, in addition to other policy provisions. The Senate lawmakers voted 70 to 29 to approve the package. The bill, which passed the Senate despite criticism from Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson and former U.S. President Donald Trump, will now pass in the House, where its fate remains uncertain. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed the move, saying in a statement he was grateful to senators for passing it. I want to bring in lecturer at the Faculty of Law in Prime University, Abuja, Mr. Chukwemeka Eze. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Amarachi. Good evening.
Good evening to you. You just heard it. The U.S. condemned the expansion of Israeli offensive in Gaza time and again. Right now, the Israeli armed forces are bombarding Rafah, a move equally condemned by other nations, yet the American government approves a foreign aid package for Israel. Don't you think this is sending mixed messages to countries visited by Secretary of State Antony Blinken in the Middle East just a couple of weeks ago?
That's a very important question, but If anybody who studies American diplomacy will agree with me that America uses a carrot and stick approach. You are aware that even the Arab countries surrounding Israel, including where missiles are thrown at Israel, that America has one aid or the other for them. So it is not new that America has approved aid for Israel. Even Egypt has aid in their favor from America. Jordan has aid in their favor from America. Lebanon has. Almost all countries within the Middle East, they have one aid or the other. So it is not new that this $95 billion package has been approved at the Senate of the United States of America. That of Ukraine has long been expected. And coincidentally, America to its type did not mention Taiwan as one of the countries that will be benefiting from the aid from Indo-Pacific. So it just mentioned the area within Asia. That's American diplomacy. So I'm not surprised at what the US has done.
There is a unique situation in the Middle East, which is, the war in Gaza that Israel has been perpetrating for weeks now. That does call for some concern. I mean, the U.S., Antony Blinken, when he visited 2 weeks ago, spoke to the leaders of Jordan, spoke to the Saudi Arabian king, and then also spoke with the Israeli and Palestinian leaders as well. He didn't sound really happy with Israel's plans to carry out this ground offensive. But the aid package, though, does say that, America does condemn Israel in private, and then in public, it supports Israel's activities in Gaza.
You are right. Basically, let's look at it from this angle. Israel's resolve to invade or to carry out further attacks, this time on Rafah, I think is in accordance with the intelligence before the Army of Israel, the IDF. Look at the hostages that yesterday they were able to rescue. You can see the firepower, it was so much. That means the forces on ground to protect guard two hostages were so much as for Israel to allegedly waste 67 lives. So that shows the tone of insecurity or readiness of Hamas to confront Israel. The kind of armory they have in Rafah. But Egypt has warned Israel that this is a red line because they don't want influx of Palestinians into Sinai. That will increase the insecurity in Sinai and the holiday resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. So basically, Egypt is warning that the about 40-year-old Camp David Accord will be at risk. UAE is also warning that the Abraham Accord will be at risk. Many countries are warning, US, Germany, Saudi Arabia, and as you have read in the news, the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. There are warnings everywhere, but for now, until those hostages, not just these two that have been released, I mean, the remaining 130-something hostages, whether dead or alive, if they are not released, I know that Israel will attack Rafah. Whatsoever may be the situation, they will attack Rafah. And the fear of al-Nakba, which first occurred around 1948-49, during the first post-independence war of Israel. The fear is that many people will be displaced and they will never return. between that time and now, the campaign for right of return is still on the board and yet to be actualized. So in history, they don't want history to repeat itself because many of those that left that time are yet to return back to where their fathers, especially those who are alive, where their fathers left that time, they are yet to return to those places. So it's a tricky situation, and it will not all go well for Israel. Turkey is claiming that it is a massacre, and they don't want a massacre to occur in Rafah. Hamas is prepared. The international community, they are brimming with anger, and World Health Organization, the Red Cross, all humanitarian bodies, all of them are complaining that the deconfliction agreement between them and Israel is not being obeyed to the letter. And we just hope that following the warning from the International Court of Justice, that Israel will not do something to violate the ruling in the case brought against it by South Africa.
But isn't Israel already violating, sorry to interrupt, but isn't Israel already violating that? I mean, we're seeing pictures, from Gaza, although these are not, really recent, but it does give us an idea of what's currently going on in Gaza. Humanitarian groups have complained. It's difficult to get aid everywhere. Right now you have the greater population of people in Gaza now situated in Rafah. That's where most of them are taking shelter, the greater population in Gaza. And Israel has begun a ground offensive. Unfortunately, we don't have pictures to show, but then, the reports that we're getting are that, the Gaza Health Ministry says at least 100 people were killed between yesterday and today, with the Israeli bombardments. And it doesn't seem like it's going to end. I mean, people are at their barest right now. They have barely enough to survive on, and isn't Israel violating some international jurisdiction, when it continues with this ground offensive in Rafah, being perhaps the last safe zone in Gaza at the moment?
Time will tell whether Israel has committed international crimes under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And you realize that we have more than we have crimes against humanity, we have war crimes, we have genocide. So the one that South Africa concentrated upon was genocide. Israel may be adjudged at the end of the day, depending on what investigation may disclose, whether they have committed war crimes or crimes against humanity. Genocide is extreme. It is mass killing of people with respect to religious considerations, ethnic considerations, tribal considerations, color considerations. So merely killing people, it does not amount to genocide. So even if you see corpses, it doesn't amount to genocide unless that stigma that they were killed because of the religion they belong to, or their color of skin, or their nationality. So recall that between 1914 and 1917, Turkey massacred, different accounts have been given. Some historians said 1.5 million Armenians. Some said 1 million. But basically it was 1.something million Armenians. That was just before the end of the First World War. But at that time, the word genocide was not in any lexicography. It was in 1943 that the word genocide was formulated. And that's why many countries that have tried to create legislations alleging that Turkey committed genocide just before the First World War was concluded. Turkey had vehemently opposed to it because the word did not exist at that time. You could use pogrom, massacre. So what Israel is doing now can graduate to genocide. The ICJ did not see it yet as genocide, but they were warned not to commit genocide, attempt to commit genocide. So the Genocide Convention is an international legislation of 1948. So I'm answering this with respect to whether Israel has committed genocide. No court, no investigation. There are commentaries that Israel has committed something close to it, or war crimes or crimes against humanity. But I think when everything settles, there will be investigation. And by the time they are done, it will be determined whether Israel has committed war crimes or crimes against humanity. But there is high sense that some of these crimes have been committed. But time will tell, because it will not just go by way of reportorials from the media. There will be a powerful United Nations rapporteur or ICC investigator that will start the journey and ensure that proofs are gotten and used for purpose of prosecution.
I just want us to deviate a little bit to talk about Ukraine, because they're also getting a little bit of this financial aid from the US. And it was just a few weeks ago that the European Union announced 50 billion euros for the Ukraine to build its economy post-war and all of that. I'm just wondering, whether this does not help to perpetrate the war that's currently going on between Ukraine and Russia.
Yes, sometimes you may need to continue a war to get to a point of where the powers will size themselves, because if Ukraine capitulates now, it will mean that Europe has capitulated, America has capitulated. So, and that capitulation will have its consequences. Finland shares a large border with Russia. Remember when Russia was able to attack Georgia, which between 2008 and 2012, I hope I'm right. At the end of the day, the Republic of Abkhazia and Ossetia were separated from Georgia up to today. So there is this tendency that once Russia strikes a particular country, it will never remain the same again. And Europe is serving allies in NATO. If they show weakness, some of those countries that were formerly members of the Commonwealth of Independent States will return under the satellite of Russia, and that will be catastrophic for European unity, not only security-wise, but in other respects. So there is need that before the point of negotiation, that Russia and Ukraine size up themselves. They get to a point that they can shake themselves and say, oh, you are a man, you are a man. And I just want to correct a particular impression. Many people, because of this age, have been thinking that what is happening in Ukraine is new. As far back as the 18th century, there have always been forces up to 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution, and even thereafter, the Orange Revolution of the 1990s. There have always been pro and anti-Russian sentiments in Ukraine. It's not new. Even when America did not play any role, because many people in the analysis, they think it's just, because America, even without America's support, in those days, there were forces in Ukraine that were opposed to Russia having influence in their country. It's nothing new. One will just need to go back to history to see that it is just that this time they have found big brothers that can support them, like the US and the European Union. So you remember Crimea, there was a time it was under Turkey. It moved from Turkey to Russia. It moved from Russia to Ukraine and moved from Ukraine back to Russia now. So one will just need to go back to history. The forces in Ukraine, if they are defeated, it goes beyond internal issues. This money should be used for recurrent expenditure and boosting the war. And if Ukraine survives, then Europe, it takes it that they will survive. And there will not be more incursions like Poland, is close, Finland, Sweden. Finland has just joined NATO. All this with respect to preparation, because over the years, for more than 100 years, Russia has been consistent in taking territory. Even Finland, part of it was taken by Russia at a particular time. So, but it's not a matter of whether they are the aggressors or not. So let's look at it from that angle.
Thank you so much, Chukwuemeka Eze. You've taken us back and forth in history, and the scary statement there is if Ukraine survives the war. Thank you again for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you, Amarachi. I'm grateful.